is a subject which is very close to your heart. What's your thoughts and reactions to hearing all of that?
So, of course, I haven't seen it. I've only heard a little bit of it. And my first thing is, of course, we should absolutely always make sure that any psychiatrist, any institution is following guidelines. Like, that goes without saying. And if that during that documentary that is uncovered that isn't happening, then of course that needs to be stopped. That is just, nobody wants to have the wrong diagnosis. My other point to this, or that aside, my other point to this is that on the other side of this, there is a lot of conversations now around ADHD and neurodiversity in general. And what I am mostly concerned about is the fact that those that actually have these conditions, by having this, a lot of this stuff, and certainly the Panorama documentary, even its title was changed, is very clickbait. And what it does is plays into this perception that ADHD perhaps isn't a condition, or that it minimizes the difficulties that people that actually have ADHD go through. And my question would be, why would somebody want to have a diagnosis of a disorder? Why would you want that? And I guess the things that come up for people are, well, because they can get medication, because they can essentially get an amphetamine, right? My thoughts would be, it's extremely expensive to go through this process. It's not a cheap process. And if you are that desperate to buy drugs, I'm fairly confident you could get them there will be cheaper options to do that. It is also a really long process, even though on the documentary he had a 40-minute session, and he said he was diagnosed in that time. The whole process of it, from my experience and those that I have spoken to and know, is a very long process. And most people don't even opt to have medication. Most people I know that have ADHD don't take medication. So that rules that out. And then the other side, I guess there'll be people that think, well, you'll get benefits of some kind. ADHD rarely actually gets to the threshold of being able to have benefits. And if you are at a level where you can prove that your day is so impaired that you require, you hit that threshold, then you hit the threshold. So I just struggle to understand what the fear is, other than somebody who has another condition being diagnosed with ADHD. But I just worry that all we're doing is trying to minimize people's experience and make it harder for those people to seek out help.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask you about, balancing the positives about discussing this sort of thing and highlighting some of the elements that are obviously within this panorama, and some of the elements around being diagnosed with anything relating to this, but also not kind of scaremongering and making people shy away from going to get help if they feel they need it.
Well, I would ask anybody here, and what other medical diagnosis, right, certainly around our mental health, would we be so questioned about? There is not a chance that if a friend of yours came to you and said, I've been diagnosed with depression, I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, would you query that person and go, well, you know what, sometimes I feel a bit sad. Sometimes I feel a little bit this. Isn't everybody a little bit depressed? Isn't everybody a little bit anxious? But when you have something, autism sometimes falls into the same category as ADHD. When you have been diagnosed, and you will know, I have been diagnosed with ADHD, and when you are, and then you have to justify what is a neurological condition that is something that you are born with, you have to somehow justify it to the man on the street who thinks they know something because they heard something clickbait, wherever it has come from. It's infuriating, it's exhausting, and to be honest, I find it now, and I am being ranty about it because I'm bored of it. In my opinion, there's always been people with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia. We've always been here. And quite honestly, everybody just needs to move forward from it. And let's just find solutions for people, whether that is through medication or whether that is through other ways. And to be honest, as I said, most people that I know actually aren't medicated. Most have chosen not to because nobody wants to. And quite honestly, if you go in the private route, I can tell you from experience, it's so ridiculously expensive to do all of that. who would want to do that? In the present climate, nobody is going out there seeking a diagnosis. And I just worry that, the journalist that went in, I haven't seen it, so obviously I can't really comment. But if you went to an optician and you said to that optician, to every question the optician gave you, can you see this? And you said, no, I can't see a thing. I cannot see a thing. I'm fairly sure they'd give you glasses, to be honest. And I think that's where my issue is, well, is this negligence? And maybe there is within this space, and I don't know for sure. But my experience, the person who diagnosed me, which was not one session, it was more than one, and I have been handheld through the whole process. It's been a long, ongoing process. Mine was private, and my psychiatrist was also a Coventry NHS practitioner as well, and a lot of them are. The private side of things is usually aside from what they do within the NHS. They're the same people, and if the waiting lists weren't 4 years long for a diagnosis or an assessment, not a diagnosis, then people wouldn't have to seek out a private assessment. And I think that's my issue, is that there are people that are really struggling, and it's so easy to dismiss this stuff because maybe we didn't understand it. And we look at it now, we go, all these people getting diagnosed because our knowledge is greater. And thankfully, because of things like the internet, we are more aware of how it presents itself. And it simply cannot be to meet a criteria of a diagnosis. It can't be, sometimes I forget my keys, sometimes I do this. That is not what it is. It's got to hit a particular threshold that has to be impairing, otherwise it's not a disorder.
Holly, really appreciate your time. Thank you for talking to us. Holly Matthews from the Happy Me Project. Her book was the winner of the Health and Wellbeing Book Award for 2022. Say Panorama on